Good morning. The graphic that you see on the left-hand side, or my left, your right, is every single airplane flight in a 24-hour period that's been condensed into 4 seconds. And I think what's a little noticeable there is clearly that North America and Europe and even Asia is you see a lot of activity there. But what's notable is that there is very little activity in South America and Africa. And these are the two regional areas of the world that is going to really contribute towards aviation in the future and all the challenges that we're going to see. So just to put things in a bit of context, I want to just identify what I believe are some issues and of course, opportunities. So we start off, of course, with the buildings that we've been designing. While they have been somewhat flexible, the inflexibility, particularly after certain events, is quite evident. So things like environmental regulation, economic uncertainty, of course, the big one, which is security. Security has driven tremendous change, as Kurt pointed out in his keynote address a little earlier. And things like explosion detection machines showing up in the front of house, so to speak, in airport terminals. These are obviously very, very large machines. Each one weighs something in the order of 10 tons, so the structural loading becomes a major issue. And of course, we don't really want to see these things. These things need to happen in the background. Airline mergers, of course, a lot of that has been happening with the American aviation scene, and that creates a lot of stress and a lot of change, and the need to be adaptable. The other issue is that the demand for air travel is insatiable. So when you look at some of the projections that are being made by Airbus and Boeing, they would suggest that the growth over the next 15 to 20 years in aviation is going to be roughly 5%, just a shade under 5% growth. And when you put that into context with sort of the global GDP growth, which the most out there estimates suggest that it might be 3% per annum over the next 15 or 20 years, you can see how aviation is going to play a really major role in the growth of the world. So the change is happening so fast that we have to some extent embraced technology, but we have to embrace technology even more. There's lots of it on the horizon. Mostly the technology will be there to really support self-service. Some of it is to increase retail revenue, and you see a lot of biometrics and things that will have a tremendous amount of play in future aviation. Biometrics are kind of unusual in that if you look at the way passengers do get processed, governments are actually quite keen to use the reliability of biometrics to process passengers. Lots of e-gates, for example, where if you're a trusted traveler, you can enter a country by just using a machine that has biometric capability. And yet we find that airlines are not embracing that. Airlines still seem to have this slight distrust of technology. So therefore, when you go to an airport and you want to board an aircraft, there's a ticket agent out there, and you've got to hand them a boarding pass or your smartphone. That can certainly happen completely seamlessly and automatically, and I believe that in fact will happen. Data. We talk about big data. You've certainly heard the term. And the issue with data right now is that there is a tremendous amount of data that exists. The data is held or owned by airlines, by the airport operator, by governments, air traffic control and so forth, concessionaires, people that are, the retailers and concessionaires that are in the building. But there isn't a way at this particular moment to really share that data. And I think once there's a mechanism and a desire to share that data, the technology will in fact will be so valuable. And I'll give you an example about shared data. Very simply, if the more data you have, the better decisions one can make. So, for example, if your spouse says, "Well, we have to go to a party on Sunday," well, you start to wonder, well, what am I going to wear? And then she says, "Well, the party's at 4 in the afternoon." Well, now you sort of narrowed your choices. You don't really have to dress up for that. And then she says, "Well, it's little Charlie's birthday." So now you know exactly how to dress. And I think that's going to happen in the aviation business, where more and more data and more information, in fact, more knowledge, will tend to streamline decisions that are very specific to a particular situation, and of course, very reliable in its application. So some of the drivers, why is it that we need to effect this change? Well, first of all, I think that it just boils down to two big issues. One is to have happy passengers and a smooth passenger journey. And the consequence of that is the increase in non-aeronautical revenue. This is an interesting chart here on the bottom left-hand corner. Airports generate almost as much revenue from non-aeronautical sources than they do from aeronautical sources. And happy passengers is promoted by the fact that you have a seamless journey. There are surveys that have been conducted by Airport Consultants International, where they assess key factors, key areas like the facilities, the environment, services, etc. And they've come to the conclusion that a negative passenger experience from all these different aspects tend to have a negative effect on non-aeronautical revenue, and that's not good. And so there's a very strong business case to improve the passenger experience. Many things go into the passenger experience. Airlines and so where airports are implementing technology in many different areas, and all for the sake of creating happy passengers. Technology is already ubiquitous in our world today, and in airports. You have technology that allows you to buy your ticket, check in, check your baggage at bag drops, shop for retail, and even in-flight entertainment today using your own device. Statistics show that 97% of all passengers today are showing up with some kind of a smart device, and about 1 in every 5 passengers are carrying 3 devices: a laptop, an iPad or a tablet, and an iPhone or a smartphone as well. And what this means is that what we need at airports in order to make things seamless for everyone is to have really good, free, reliable Wi-Fi. And sadly, we don't. Even in the most advanced airports, Wi-Fi is encumbered by lots of pop-up ads and slowness and all these things. And technology obviously needs to have fast, reliable, and free Wi-Fi. The IATA fast travel program that was instituted in, I think, 2007, had a goal to provide 80% of all passengers with technical solutions to enable full self-service by 2020. And that means from the time you arrive at the airport to the time you get on the airplane, you should have something that that 80% of the passengers could do essentially without any interference from a ticket agent or a security screening person and so forth. And there have been lots of improvements and lots of innovation that has happened in this area. But there's been one exception, and we don't really know quite why that's happening. But the so-called bags ready to go model has, pardon the pun, not taken off. There's a lot of regulatory issues that are associated with the bags ready to go issue, and hopefully they will be solved in the next 5 to 10 years. It's something that we do need to sort of have this fast travel program take effect. So some of it is happening through sort of the shift to off the airport. And this actually helps considerably because you can do things on your own schedule. It will eventually, when it does take hold, reduce the real estate needed for airports. And airports, as you've gathered by now, are really immense objects on the landscape. Some of it driven by the aeronautical reasons, but many of it driven by things like processing. So a lot of it, I believe, will shift to off the airport. So if we look at the left-hand graphic on the top, a lot of it has already happened. We do have online mobile check-in, we have auto check-in, all kinds of things like that. Bag tagging is something where we still haven't really made it. We still resort to very conventional means, the only difference being that rather than hand your bag to a ticket agent as we did in the past, you're going to a bag drop and dropping it off. But the process is still the same. And I think what's going to happen there, or what seems to be on the horizon, is off-airport bag tagging. Some of it will come with an electronic bag tag that you will be able to essentially buy as part of your luggage. There's some luggage manufacturers that already have that. Or you will certainly be able to print your bag tag at home and tag your bag just the way you print a boarding pass at home today. And then, of course, the bag drop, although customarily and conventionally it's been at the airport, there are some cities where there's some experimentation going on with bag drops off the airport. And Las Vegas is probably the one city that's driving it, and it's because it's Las Vegas. So these things will certainly happen in the future, although there are some, as I said earlier, some regulatory challenges. We need to have a shift to mobile. Airlines are completely shifting to mobile technology so that they're not encumbered by having to be at a check-in desk. Ticket agents now have their enterprise systems all available to them on a tablet, so it makes them mobile. It allows them to move around. And what that means is that they can deal with their customers in times when things go wrong without having to direct a passenger to the customer service area, which you can see there on the bottom right-hand corner slide out there. And that is probably one of the worst experiences that a passenger can have, recognizing that they've probably missed their connection, and then they've got to put up with something like that. So the shift to mobile, I think, is a very, very strong thing on the horizon in terms of passenger satisfaction. And one could sort of imagine a scenario where, well, today what happens, you might be sitting on a flight and you get an email or you get an alert on your phone that says, sorry, flight is late, you've missed your connection, please see a customer service agent. Well, one could imagine that with mobile technology, you could, in fact, get the same kind of message that we're sorry, your flight has been delayed and you've missed your connection. Please, go to area whatever where you will be handed a dossier with your new arrangements, with your new boarding pass, perhaps a little overnight bag, and a voucher for a room at the airport hotel tonight. So whilst you would have certainly preferred to have made your flight, I think that customer service like that will probably be much better for the passengers. And we have to admit that these kinds of situations do arise. There are weather issues. There are all kinds of issues that do cause it. They're not going to go away. And so airlines have to really deal with making that transition of a missed flight much better than it is today. Improving operational efficiency. This is clearly to interest for everybody. It's for the airlines and the operators. It means smoother terminal transitions for passengers. It means better energy efficiency, better gate utilization, and so on and so forth. But as I said earlier, this does require integration of data, which will then result in much better prediction of delays, and it will create, again, a good passenger experience for passengers that have missed their flight connections. Technology, biometrics is the buzzword today. So biometrics in general and technology will play a major role in improving processing of passengers. You can see, for example, on the bottom right-hand slide, this is a concept that IATA is promoting and has developed, which is all about security screening, and it's not about pushing everybody through a single point of a single portal, but it's a sort of a risk-based approach to security, which some airports have started to use now. So you look for that, look for more of that in the future. Some other new and emerging technologies. On the left-hand side, it's fairly blasé, but we're talking about things like virtual reality and single biometric travel, artificial intelligence, and so forth. And you can see the percentages on the top and the bottom are the percentages of airports that are really interested and are participating in the development of this technology. So over the next 5 years, you can see, particularly on the extreme right, things like artificial intelligence. About 1/3 of the airports are interested today in the short term, and about half the airports are thinking about that 5 to 10 years down the road. So technology is really what it's all about. I'm not really going to go over this slide, but you can see this is a flavor of things to come in the airport of the future. And the future is not way out there. The future is actually quite close. So a colleague of mine at my firm, he's our director of foresight and innovation. His name is Chris Lupkeman. And he's got this great job. His job is to sort of look out into the future and identify things that will impact our lives, our business, and so on and so forth. And through his research, he sort of coined a phrase that I'd like to share with you, and that is that the future is over-predicted but under-imagined. And think about that for a moment, right? And so let's imagine what an airport in the future might look like. And I'll do that through this particular graphic. I'm not sure whether that's readable. It's a little hard to see from here. But I'll try to go through the various steps. So as designers of airports, we always talk about passenger flow. So we'll take the departing passenger who might, so the departing passenger that might arrive at the curbside, obviously through some kind of high-speed transport, might be met by a robot attendant in lieu of somebody else, would essentially go into the airport, go to, well, first of all, the bags get dropped off the airport somewhere, maybe in a hotel or a rail station perhaps, and then would go through essentially a touchless security aisle where they would simply walk through just the way you would walk through, in any railway station or cinema or what have you. Get into the retail hall, do some shopping at a virtual wall. This again would reduce the amount of front of house retail that retailers might need, the sort of the real expensive premium space. Go into a lounge and sit down and have a pink noise generator there to reduce sound levels and make things a little more comfortable for the passenger. Also, the one thing that I believe will happen in the future in airports is you will get the silent airport. There will not be any announcements made, and that's because the announcements will be very bespoke to you and will be pushed out to the technology that you have, be it a tablet or a smartphone. It will tell you exactly what you need to know in terms of your flight and your arrangements. So look out for that. There are already 2 airports, Mumbai and Bangalore in India, where they don't make announcements, and that's throughout the airport, not just in the airport lounges. And then, of course, you would board the aircraft through a sort of an unmanned portal. And yes, believe it or not, you'll be able to reserve space in the overhead compartment, and no doubt the airlines will charge for that. So that was sort of the journey of the departing passenger, and I think the arrivals passenger will be somewhat similar. They will come off the aircraft. They will either, if they're a transfer passenger, they will go through another touchless security portal, and if they're a passenger that is leaving the airport, they will come through. They will get picked up by an autonomous vehicle, electric, obviously, and that in itself will trigger lots of issues for designers in terms of parking and electric charging and so forth. So this is kind of what we envision the future airport experience to be. So I want to just close with about 60 years ago, believe it or not now, a young musician named Bob Dylan wrote a song called "The Times They Are A-Changing," and he wrote it in the mid '60s, and it was clearly about the social issues and social injustice that was prevalent, particularly in America at that time. Thinking about it, I think that Bob Dylan perhaps mistakenly wrote that song, and he should have written it about airports, because those are the one thing that has been changing continuously since the 1960s. I think if you look at the exhibition on aviation that we saw yesterday, you'll see how the airport terminal over the years has changed from the old Aero Saarinen terminal to what's sort of prevalent today. And what we can expect from today over the next 25 or 30 years is something that will, in hindsight, be a bit unrecognizable. So thank you, and please be part of the change.